I think I see a lot of lawbreakers up in this house.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Sodcast, For Me, the podcast about film, culture, politics, and Steven Soderbergh, where we watch every film directed by American filmmaker Steven Soderbergh and explore how they speak to their moment. And this one, the show's hosted by two guys. I'm one of the guys. My name is Jake Serwin.
I'm one of the guys. My name is Ian Ryan. Jake, what's up?
I'm doing fine. I'm excited that your long con is finally...
Oh yeah,
it's coming to fruition.
Well, which one? Which of
moving
my long
to
cons?
Mexico like 6 years ago to prepare
yes.
for the traffic episode.
That's right.
When did you move to Mexico? Was it 6 years
yeah,
ago?
almost like 6 years and change.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just went with the gut there.
Yeah. You got it.
Yeah, gotta trust it. How are you doing? Did I say that?
You didn't, but I'm doing well. I think I don't know if I've mentioned on pod that rainy season seems to have started. So drought for the moment averted. That's always nice on the farm and in the city. That's a relief for everybody. But
water is sort of the ultimate drug.
That's right. Our guest today really neglected something in his book.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. What about you? Anything special going on over there?
No. Great.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, cool.
All right. Take care of business.
Let's get it out of the way. You want to support the show, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $5 a month. You get a bonus episode every other week. Helps us keep this feed free. Please consider supporting us at patreon.com/podcasty for me. We will be doing an episode on heroin. I don't know. We'll just do it for the show.
You'll do anything, right?
Yeah. For $5 a month.
I honestly, unfortunately, that's a specific drug that I'm not particularly clued in on. So I don't know how much $5 worth of heroin is, but might be enough for an episode.
It might be. You know who might be able to tell us the answer to that or not? I don't know. Don't want to put too much pressure on him. Our guest today is an honors faculty fellow, associate director of the Center for Work and Democracy at Arizona State University. He's written all kinds of crazy, great stuff, but most importantly for our purposes, a book that we have literally quoted from on the show before. Quick Fixes, Drugs in America from Prohibition to the 21st Century Binge. Welcome to the show, Benjamin Y. Fong. Ben, how you doing?
Hey, Ben.
Good. Thanks so much for having me. And when the second edition of Quick Fixes comes out, I'll be sure to add a chapter about water.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Really just astronomical consumption numbers across the board, basically, throughout history.
Astronomical consumption. That's I've been listening to Dune Messiah audiobook, so actually water is a drug, especially astronomically.
Yeah,
do you have any idea what happens in that book?
I do. I've read it.
It's it's so weird.
I think he's gonna.
I think there's like the space witches are trying to contrive like incest.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it. Somebody
so
prominent loses one of their senses for like fully half of the book. I don't know if you've gotten to that part yet.
I don't think I've gotten to that part yet. Anyway, so that's like, I'm very keyed in on, that's about as much as I know about drugs is from Dune.
From Spice, I see.
I'm a big time loser.
Yeah.
Ben, are you cool? Are you like a cool guy?
Good first question.
I would say decidedly not. No, I mean, it's a very sober look at drugs in the book, I would say. Mm-hmm. And, no, I would say no. My kids would say no, too. So it's verified for me.
Famously, they'll do that.
Yeah.
I was listening to the commentary for the film Traffic, which we're going to discuss today. And this is sometimes we do a segment on the show called The Two Questions. This is sort of a pre-two question, which happens sometimes. Soderbergh talked about how, because I think when he recorded this commentary, he has a daughter, but she wasn't old enough yet to have done this. But he says, that's got to feel so terrible as a parent the first time your kid says "fuck you." And I was like, I don't think I've ever said that to any of my parents. Have you guys said that? Or Ben, you have children. Have they said this to you?
No, I would be mortified to ever say that to my parents. And my kids are not yet old enough to do that, I would say, but they're getting there.
It could be coming down the pike. You say no more Robux or whatever.
I think it'll probably be fine. I have a feeling like we're not going to get there, but you never know where life takes you.
Sure. Ian, have you said this to your parents?
I haven't, although I think they would probably say like spiritually I've said that to them. There's ways to say fuck you to your parents.
When you dropped out of the Medical Explorers Club to get an English degree.
I never dropped out of Medical Explorers. I'm still a Medical Explorers.
Emeritus.
But you're right. Yes, when I stopped training to be a doctor, that might have been one version. Or saying like, I'm not going to go to church with you anymore or something. That's another version.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of that can be traced right back to the drug problem. In this
Drug
country.
use.
Yeah. We're joined humiliatingly on this series by our friend, the virtual assistant from the 2022 Steven Soderbergh film, Kimmy. It's Kimmy.
Hello, Jake, Ian, and esteemed guest Ben. I am Kimmy from In the Computer.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey,
Welcome
Kimmy.
to
How's
the show.
computer? Yeah.
Much like the characters in this film, I deal with traffic too. Web traffic, that is.
That's
Great.
a great point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that all you got? All right, great. See you later, Kimmy. So
Bye, Kimmy.
Does Kimmy respond too? Or
Oh,
is
yeah.
Kimmy...
Oh, she'll respond.
if you want. Yeah.
Do you have any questions for her?
Why did Kimmy read the book? Is she excited about it?
Oh, yeah. She does like to check out our authors' oeuvre sometimes. I don't know. Kimmy?
I have read every book.
Oh, great.
Okay.
All right. What did you think about this one?
It was cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she liked
Maybe you
it.
are cool, Ben. This is good. Kimmy thinks you're
At
cool.
least
The book
one
is
person
cool.
thinks I'm cool.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
I liked all the parts about Harry Potter.
I think she
Oh.
might have read a different book. I think she's maybe
Dang.
confused. Because when
Okay,
you
that's
take in
too
that
bad.
much information,
Sure. Easy to get
Anyway.
confused. Yeah.
we'll return to Kimmy in just a moment. So let's get into our first segment, the two questions. This is where we ask each other two questions. Ben, were you able to prepare a question for us today?
I was. It's related to traffic. I'm wondering about your all's favorite movie that captures the drug or alcohol experience. Maybe this is an over talked about question in film podcasts, but I'm curious to know what y'all think.
Well, I haven't had a lot of drug experiences. I'm like a loser and a scaredy cat. And
yeah,
so
you're like the guys that the straight edge punks beat up for being not cool enough. Like you're too straight edge for them.
Well, because it's not really like ideological for me. It's just fear based.
Yep.
So that I got no backbone.
But like alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes, legal drugs.
I don't like drinking, but I've done it. I don't like weed, but I've done it. I have not done any nose or needle stuff. I have been administered all kinds of pharmacological medications.
Which
listeners
are
to this show,
a big part of the book, a big part of this
yes,
discussion.
they
as
are.
well.
The distinction is blurrier than one might think.
Mhm.
Listeners to the show may remember about a year ago, I was audibly on prednisone for a couple of the episodes. I had a bad sinus infection.
Hormonal
and
distortion. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. In terms of movies that make me feel like I get the whole drug thing, I mean, I do like Enter the Void, which is like a DMT movie, but also I think kind of just like a Being Dead movie. So who knows? There's also a movie called, is it The Eye of the Serpent? There's
The Embrace of the Serpent?
Embrace of the Serpent,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. About a guy traveling into the Amazon to try to find ayahuasca. And the movie is in black and white for most of the film, so that when he takes ayahuasca, it can turn into a color film in a way that sort of apparently mimics the effects of ayahuasca, which is similar to something that Steven Soderbergh did in his film Kafka.
It's true. Yep.
And I like those, although they might not be right. I don't know. And then, like, in terms of drunken films, I think Mikey and Nicky, the Elaine May film, which is has active alcoholics on screen.
Yeah, right. Then like diegetic and non-diegetically drinking. Yeah.
Ian, what about you?
Those are good answers. I agree that I've never taken DMT, but I found it compelling to think about like trying how much can you represent somebody losing their senses or gaining new senses on screen. I think that's a good challenge.
The spirit molecule.
Yes, exactly. All right. Yeah, I forgot that you're a big like Rogan.
She likes Rogan a lot. Yeah.
The movie Monos. I don't know if you guys have seen this film.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's good. It's also kind of like, I forget if they actually specify the country, but it's like child soldiers in kind of semi-Colombia. And they take mushrooms, and I've taken mushrooms in my life. And I think it was cool to see on screen somebody just like everything. The sun is a little bit brighter. You're not seeing the Trix rabbit steal your childhood dreams or something, which I feel like is the normal psychedelics on screen. Yeah, I mean, that's maybe just based on my limited exposure to drugs. That felt true, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ian. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, Ben, what do you think?
Do you have a favorite drug movie?
I guess I just have a boring answer. I used to watch more films than I do, but recently it's sort of fallen off. The film that really captures the experience, like the Yeah, I mean, I guess both the drug and alcohol experience for me is leaving Las Vegas. It just does it so well. And I kind of think of all drug taking, I guess I'm including alcohol in that, as an attempt to obliterate yourself in some small way, if only for like, an evening. And I think it captures that really well. That line, that Nick Cage line about not knowing whether he's drinking to kill himself or killing himself to drink is stuck with me when I first watched it, and I always remembered that.
I find that Hollywood, as much as it has this cartoonish depiction of drug use and the drug trade for much of its history, continuing, there's this like other stream of the sort of confessional drug movie, or the like I got sober drug movie, which seems like it shouldn't exist side by side with the kind of drug movie that Hollywood often makes, that seems like no one there has ever, they don't know drugs are real. They think it's like wizards.
Harry Potter.
Exactly. And those are often kind of like a bummer to me. I mean, like the AA meeting, and it pops up in so many things. There's like it's one of the late Liam Neeson thrillers. I think it might be A Walk Among the Tombstones or something, where there's just a forgettable movie, but there's like a sequence toward the end where they're cutting back and forth between an AA meeting where someone is reading the 12 steps and someone else is like getting assassinated or something. Like, what? This is just like it's just like a piece of culture now that it's aesthetic fodder.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the references. I'm going to check out those films. I was mostly asking just for a list of things to watch.
Oh yeah, sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think there is something about the drug experience that's very difficult to capture on film, and it's almost a mistake to try. There was some silly Netflix thing about celebrities, actors talking about their psychedelic experiences that was on in the background somewhere. I just thought it was like the most unwatchable thing ever made. It's just like no one wants to hear about that,
really.
Especially actors talking about psychedelic experiences. But I think that there is something much more interesting about the whole drug trade. And I think that's what makes Traffic more interesting than a movie about the drug experience,
Yeah, it mostly keeps you on the outside of it.
Yeah.
In a way that we'll talk about it. Ian, what about you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, building off of Ben's answer, I think I also appreciate it when the drug taking is not maybe the focus of the film. But for example, I mean, looking at Leaving Las Vegas, obviously consumption of alcohol is a huge piece of it. But we've talked about the film Spectacular Now, where a young person is just depressed and drinks as part of that depression. You can see that depression manifesting in like a 18-year-old being drunk, a 18-year-old Miles Teller or whatever. But it's not really saying alcohol always does this. It's just saying like, if you have depression and you don't know how to deal with it, one of the ways that it shows up in people's lives is in taking alcohol or consuming alcohol to excess in inappropriate situations. And I think that to me feels truer to life, of saying like, a lot of times people drinking are just having a glass of wine at a wedding, but also if you have pre-existing problems, then substances, like you're saying, Ben, are one of the ways that you can try to obliterate yourself for a while. And then they happen to be, I think, like very noticeable ways that people obliterate themselves. So I think that works for me.
I think that a lot of the interesting things and the things that would show up as interesting on film in particular are around drugs and not about drugs directly.
Yeah.
Right. There's a great, speaking of Las Vegas and drinking films, there's a great like pseudo documentary from 2020 called Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets by the Ross brothers. Did you see this movie, Ian?
No, I don't know this movie.
It takes place at a bar called the Roaring Twenties. That's like a shitty off-strip Vegas locals bar.
Okay.
And most of the people in the film are just like actual regulars at the bar, but then there's some scripted elements, but you're very obviously seeing like actual drunkenness and the various, some of it is like flirtation, some of it is somebody's miserable talking about his divorce or whatever, and like it's especially in 2020 it was a particular balm to just like see people interacting with each other.
Sure, that sounds like the type of thing I've been
terrifying, of course, because My favorite drug is Regeneron, by the way.
Okay.
Changed my answer. I have a question for the two of you. Thank you, by the way, for the question,
Yes.
Ben. My question to you is, was there ever a time where you thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was Latina?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
I'm finding out. No, I'm just kidding.
Checking your watch.
I'm sure everyone's gone through that. I mean, it was like, I think it was a shock.
Experience.
Well, I don't think it was necessarily an individual experience. I think that it was a cultural shock, right?
Right.
There were a bunch of stories about how she's actually not Latina, right?
Yeah, because of the they kept casting her. I mean, it was like
Right.
it was like an old Hollywood thing. Like you find out that Jennifer Jones or something isn't actually like Mongolian the way they keep casting her.
Right.
But she does have an interesting background. Her father is Welsh, while her mother is Irish. So she's a real exotic type.
Yeah.
Ian, did you know about this?
I knew about this. I think I can't recall what day it fell on. It's not like a JFK assassination type event in my
Where
life
were
for
you?
me. But
Yeah.
I can say that, I mean, this is like the fault of Hollywood. I think that's clear to everybody. If you keep casting a person as this race, I guess it's the equivalent of like Cliff Curtis or something. But, what are we supposed to think at a certain point if you keep telling us this is the case?
Well, here she's vaguely European. Is that right?
She's
she
doing
says
her own
she's
accent, I
European.
think.
Yeah.
I think she's doing. She sounds a little Welsh at times.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, her father was the owner of a sweet factory.
Oh.
Now that's the hardest drug to quit. They say is sweet factory. Okay, so let's get into the movie. Oh wait, no, we had this other segment.
Nope.
We had
Can't. Yeah.
God damn it! I really hate the show.
Okay.
This is Steven So Darn Busy, where we catch up with all of Steven Soderbergh's producing work since his last film as a director or whatever.
Okay, so he's a busy guy.
He is.
Obviously, this is his big twofer year, where he's got Aaron Brockovich, which we have already discussed as you're listening to this, but we have not recorded the episode now.
That's
so
true.
We're experiencing a sort of it's kind of like a psychoactive experience.
I understand. Okay.
So in 1999, he starts a production company with George Clooney called Section 8 Productions. The implications of which name we will have talked about on our Aaron Brockovich episode. We'll get to it. We'll get to it then before.
Yep.
But they're working on Ocean's 11. They're putting that together while he's doing this. He's also, their first production is a movie called The Jacket, which is based on a Jack London story that is like a PTSD time travel movie that eventually gets made with Adrian Brody and Keira Knightley. I was trying to figure out if that's the movie he was promoting when he was on SNL and did the Rasta character.
Okay.
Inconclusive.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
I see.
He also signs on to be a celebrity mentor for film students through a website started by film director Doug Lyman. And that website is called nibblebox.com.
Whoa. That's
I don't know.
Quibi type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like early internet. It's, 1999, 2000. Like, how is Hollywood going to use the internet stuff?
Which we'll come back to in like Mosaic and things of this nature.
He's often at the forefront of technology and on this film as well, but I don't think Nibblebox was turned out that wasn't the new
Yeah, you gotta,
way
sometimes
forward.
you're gonna sow your seeds on barren ground or whatever it is, can't all be hits.
I'm bringing back Nibblebox.
Okay. Thanks, Kimmy.
It's one of your
Wait, sorry,
projects.
Ian, were you talking about spilling your
I
seed
know,
on the ground?
It did sound like that,
Okay.
but I was
Just
talking
checking.
about like the parable of the sower type stuff.
Okay.
He's working on the famous sequel we all love, Son of Schizopolis.
Son of Schizopolis, which he keeps threatening to make.
Yeah.
Ben, have you ever seen the film Schizopolis?
I have not, but
Okay.
I just checked out nibblebox.com, and it's now a food service software company.
Food service
Oh,
software. So it's
wow.
like
Mhm.
logistics.
It's like if you want to create a self-service kiosk in
Okay.
your restaurant, they'll
I
help you
see.
out.
Okay.
I saw there was somebody on I think this might have been on like a 404 or some website like that. They somebody found a bunch of Sonic restaurant like touchscreen computers that had been
like Ziosks or something.
they had been updated, and so the old ones were on eBay, and somebody bought a bunch of them and like hacked them to like do all kinds of stuff, like play Roblox, I think.
Okay.
So that's cool. I don't know. Then, this is a person we haven't talked about, but there's an important person in Steven Soderbergh's career who is important in the creation of this film, and whose political position, I think, is relevant to how we read this film. So Soderbergh's first agent when he first started out was a woman named Anne Dollard.
Mm-hmm.
This is when the Sex, Lies, and Videotape days, like 1988, 89.
We talked about her passing away and getting I think she gets a dedication in Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Yes, she fell off a horse in 1989 and was killed. Just like freak, tragic thing. She was an activist. She organized No Nukes concerts. She worked with Cesar Chavez. Through these connections, she met and dated Robert Kennedy Jr. She dated RFK Jr. in the 80s.
I did not see that.
So,
okay. Who knows?
But they were close enough that after she died, her ashes were scattered at his house on Cape Cod.
Wow. Okay.
I presume with Soderbergh in attendance, although I can't confirm that.
Yeah.
Then, sort of as a tribute to her, he takes on her brother Pat Dollard as his agent. Pat Dollard, who was a recovered drug user, like sort of in and out of recovery. And he was he really pushed this movie to get made, in part because it was like a passion project for him. He is a truly insane Hollywood conservative. He had a web radio show called the Jihadi Killer Hour.
Yeah.
Wow.
From May 2008 to 2010.
Not in 2002. Yeah. In 2008 in Obama era. He
had Andrew Breitbart on. He had Steven Crowder on the show. He tweeted after the Fort Hood shooting, quote, "If there is even one more act of Muslim terrorism, it is then time for Americans to start slaughtering Muslims in the streets, all of them."
God.
So this guy's nuts. And Dollard, he has a relapse in the early 2000s. He seems like he has a bipolar episode. He fires Soderbergh because he decides he's going to direct a movie about the Iraq War. And he accumulates thousands of hours of footage, and he's editing a kind of a man possessed. Soderbergh sticks by him though, pays for his rehab.
Oh.
But then also once the movie gets put together, he says beyond the politics of it, it's just it's so undeniable. I gotta help this thing get distribution. So I don't know. We'll pick the story up later, but I think that's important context. So let's talk about Traffic. This is a film by Steven Soderbergh. Comes out December 27th, 2000. Merry Christmas. What's our experience with this film? Was the first time we saw it, and Soderbergh thoughts generally. Ben, are you a Soderbergh guy?
Have you seen any of his other stuff? Any feelings about the man?
No strong feelings. I haven't seen a ton of his stuff, but the stuff I've seen I've liked. I did see Traffic, I think shortly after it came out, and I remember thinking it was fun and gritty and realistic, and now come to question all that stuff many years later. But really, upon rewatching, I think it holds up. It's fun. It's entertaining. I think it's built around some bad tropes that were by the year 2000 probably shouldn't have been used in film. But the whole thing was pretty fun to watch. Yeah,
I mean it's interesting to think about it because some friends of the show I was talking with one of them when we started doing the Soderbergh things. You guys are going to be so hard on Traffic. You have to understand at the time, and on the one hand, sure, at the time, looking at what else was available, this is pretty nuanced and not advocating for the slaughter of all drug users in the streets, I guess. But also at the time, it's still, it's hardly a radical vision of a new world where all drugs are legalized or something.
Yeah, I shout out to this friend. I know who you're talking about. Hi to our friend. I think that even for 2000, if you're comparing this to NBC pundit opinions, sure, this is a little bit more nuanced. This is a little bit more sympathetic. Maybe that puts it in a positive category. But people have been writing sympathetically about substance dependency since 1910, and people have been investigating where do these attitudes about drugs come from? Are they tied to racial assumptions, classist assumptions, just general appeal of punitive responses to people's social behavior? Since at the very least, I'm going to say the late 1950s. So this is, I understand what you mean by maybe compared to other major Hollywood productions that are just full on or close to reefer madness level fear mongering about drugs. It's doing okay.
Just drugs being one of 5 reasons the bad guys are doing what they're doing that you can pull out of a hat.
Yeah.
We're last time it was Italian, so we'll do Colombians this time.
Right.
You know,
exactly. Yeah, it's better than that stuff. And I will say that for me, this is a rewatch. I was not a big fan of it the first time I saw it many years ago in college. I still think it's just fine. Stylistically, this is the most I've enjoyed it. I think I was really paying attention to the choices that Soderbergh's making. And for a major Hollywood production that does more than $100 million or however much it does, I think it's weird. The movie is weird. And that all of that stuff I'm into. But unfortunately, I'm with Ben that, or maybe I'm even harder than you, Ben, that the tropes are so in the fore for this movie that it's hard for me to like really get excited about any of the storytelling or the character development.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not that hard on it because the things that I think it gets wrong are very specific. They're very specific things about certain characters that I think are off. But I think actually it doesn't do that bad of a job at portraying certain underlying mechanisms in the drug trade. Every Topher Grace speech in the film is wildly irritating, but some of what he says is nonetheless true when he talks about, the drug trade as an unbeatable market force.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And just, going over the basics of how you can fit the nation's drug supply, like cocaine and heroin, in a few containers, right? And there's millions of containers coming across the border. How are you going to like reliably interdict like any of those drugs? And they talk to a few border agents at one point in the film, and they actually pump up the numbers a little bit, say they're like, arresting like 40 to 50% of the drugs coming across the border. It's nowhere near that. But I think the film nonetheless does a good job showing that, you can't really crack down at the border or, send police to Mexico to break up these cartels because they're just going to move supply around. It's the market force. It's not individuals.
Yeah, I mean, the film has its kind of it has sort of a docudrama aspect to it as well. Obviously, there's the scene with all of the politicians, including
real life politicians.
Yes, real life politicians, including Twitter superstar Chuck Grassley is in there briefly. Yep. Check out his posts; they're really good. But also like the sequence where they're at the is it Epic? Is that what
Epic,
they call the like nerve center in El Paso? Apparently, when they first like got there, the guy running it just started explaining things to Michael Douglas, the actor, and Soderbergh started filming.
Whoa, that's
and
cool.
So just like fingers crossed that he doesn't say, "Now, Mr. Douglas, if you'll come over here," and like that's what's in the movie. It's like Michael Douglas being interested as a I think probably a well-intentioned Hollywood lunatic who like thinks, "Oh, there's a drug problem, right? How are we going to fix this?" But like there are elements there where it feels like the movie wants you to think, and Soderbergh he invokes in interviews and in the commentary, he talks about Z, the Costa Gavras film, and Battle of Algiers. He apparently was watching all the time. But like, I think maybe he doesn't really know what those movies are about because like he also talks about how having met a bunch of law enforcement officials, he realizes they're just doing their jobs and they're trying to do a good job,
But see, what's weird is that I think those parts of the film are effective because they portray this like administrative sort of like false dispassion, right? That or this like focus on metrics that they're trying to achieve. I mean, we talked about Epic, but I also like the Border Patrol guy in San Isidro, where he is like also giving a very dry explanation and mixing this weird amount of, I think you said, Ben, like pumping up the numbers. So he's kind of like trying to make himself look good, but also this realism of like, well, maybe that means that also just proportionally a lot more drugs are getting in. If we're getting 40% and overall production is up, then, whatever that amounts to nothing in terms of like the success of the drug war. And I don't know if that was also a real Border Patrol person. I couldn't figure out the name of that actor, if he's an actor.
I think it was. I mean, the documentary components of the film, I thought like worked at disparate purposes there, because the border stuff I found quite frustrating because you can't take those guys' words for anything.
Yeah.
Right.
But the politician scene worked well because you just saw Michael Douglas going around and getting different pieces of advice from different people. And that, I mean, I feel like that actually captures something quite well about drug discourse in America, which is that everyone's quite opinionated in very different ways about it. Like I'll tell people that I wrote a book about drugs, and no one will ask me what it's about. They'll just tell me about their own drug experience or their own thoughts about drugs. And it is one of those topics where everyone thinks something and they want to like offer you the advice. And him going around and the way that's portrayed, I think it captures something of that. Whereas the Border Patrol stuff, it's like falsely realistic, I guess, or it's just portraying like what they say as if it's truth.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I suspect that today Soderbergh, just having absorbed the kind of received even like liberal wisdom about the borders, he would be more skeptical. But at the time, they seemed like, we used to have conservative nut jobs in this country who you could have a conversation with.
Right.
And now that, so a little bit of the background, because as you said, Ben, like drugs and drug policy, it's quite addictive even as a concept now, isn't it? This comes about. This project is the baby of producer Laura Bickford, she's an Upper East Side like rich girl. Her father is a lawyer and her mother's an investment banker. She goes to Sarah Lawrence. She works in the music industry in the UK for a while, where in 1989 she sees the miniseries Traffic, which by Simon Moore, which I watched some of. It's all on YouTube in identical VHS rip quality to the DVDs that I paid for.
Yeah.
And
it's got Bill Patterson in there, and
Bill Patterson, Fleabag's dad, from Fleabag, and it's good for like a mini series, and I think because it's 6 episodes long, it can convey a lot more nuance than this film can. And I'll bring up some of the differences as we go through. It also has Lindsay Duncan, who is in all kinds of stuff, including City Hall, a film we talked about on this podcast. She's in Star Wars Episode 1. She's in Birdman. She's in the worst scene in Birdman. She's the critic that Michael Keaton lays into. It also has a very young Julia Ormond as the daughter character. But it really it follows the story pretty closely in a lot of ways. There, it's instead of San Diego and Tijuana and DC, Cincinnati, it's London and Hamburg and Pakistan. But she's obsessed with this thing and wants to, she wants to turn it into a movie. She wants to, I guess, save the world in doing so.
And then you got Soderbergh separately, who, at least in his telling, just wanted to make a movie about drugs, but he says not about drug addicts. And
right.
So he's like looking for material to find something that's going to satisfy the storytelling itch. We've already talked about the fact that at this point, he feels as if his own writing is not of interest to him, and he's sort of like more excited about other people's scripts. So he gets this idea to remake Traffic from Laura Bickford, and he also combines it with this other script, right?
Yeah, to clarify.
Yeah.
Bickford, obsessed with the miniseries.
Yeah.
Does not have the money to option it.
Mm-hmm.
So she asks her boyfriend for the money to option it, and her boyfriend's name is Steven Soderbergh. So they're dating. Yeah. And he lends her the money, and they're dating like on and off through the production. She also had previously dated Benicio Del Toro, incidentally. So all these people seem really cool. Like, I guess
that's nice.
They can hang. Yeah. But there's this other script. She's trying to find a writer. And so she finds this script by Stephen Gaghan, which is, I think it's called The Powers That Be. And it's about Beverly Hills teens who pretend that they're like a Chicano gang to get drugs. It was actually a rewrite of a treatment sold to New Line by a 14-year-old girl named Jessica Kaplan.
That's cool. I didn't see that.
Yeah, this eventually gets made in 2005 as a movie called Havoc with Anne Hathaway. That was the only narrative directed by Barbara Koppel of like Harlan County, USA fame.
Yeah. That's weird.
Nobody talks about that. But so she wants Gaghan to work for Traffic. Gaghan can't because he's already writing a war on drugs movie for Ed Zwick, the Last Samurai guy. And then he's like, I want to do something else. I'll let you have this writer guy if I can be a producer on the movie, rather. So that's why he's a producer on the movie. There's also a New York Times writer named Tim Golden who wins a Pulitzer for his drug reporting at some point, who he like contributes to this. Gaghan himself, prep school kid from Louisville who is a drug user for like 20 years. He says in 1997 he hit rock bottom, and so he's like actively in treatment while he's writing the script. There's all kinds of other Hollywood nonsense that is most of the book Rebels on the Backlot by Sharon Waxman that I've talked about on the show before. So if you're interested in reading a lot about like contingency clauses and stuff, check that book out. But eventually this all-star cast gets put together, and Soderbergh wants to do it sort of Schizopolis style. Like he's the camera operator.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 9 cities, but they shoot it in like 50 days.
But also, he says that there's like 100 speaking parts. The script is something like 160 pages long.
Yeah,
it's like building into this pretty humongous project. But you're right; he's trying to mix his bigger budget stuff with this sense that he's going to be close to the actors, in there with them, shoot a lot of natural light. I felt very vindicated for my argument on the line me that maybe Soderbergh draws from Ken Loach in general in his career, because he says in an interview, I was drawing a lot from Ken Loach, and I was thinking about like cinema verite. Yeah. How do I get close enough that it feels real, but also shoot from far enough away that I can just let people walk around? There's like no blocking. Like, how do I just let people do the scene and make it feel like real life? And he's doing a lot of handheld stuff, obviously.
So let's, the film's kind of broken up into 3 storylines that intersect.
I wish there was a way to tell the 3 storylines apart. That would be my dream. It would be
I do too.
Visually somehow. Yeah.
We'll talk about Mexico Filter in just a second. Let's start with the Michael Douglas section of the film. Now, he is a judge named Robert Wakefield, who is appointed the new drug czar by the unseen president. I think we're supposed to assume that it's Clinton. This movie came out after the election, so Bush is president when the movie comes out, but it's made in the Clinton era. He's replacing a comic book general played by James Brolin. Just looks like the guy who like invented the Incredible Hulk or something. And he's basically tells him, like, he gives him this speech about how the Khrushchev speech about like, he gives him 2 letters. If you get into a pickle, open the first letter. If you get into another pickle, open the second one. The first one says blame it all on me, and the second one says write 2 letters.
Yeah, great, classic. I thought this was a straight up analog for actual Clinton administration drug czar Barry McCaffrey, who was like a military guy who was also in charge, and it seemed like the guy looks like him. I assumed Soderbergh was just trying to say, like, imagine that this is the next guy.
I don't know anything about Barry McCaffrey, actually. Was he just standard ineffective drug czar?
Yeah, I mean, he was like, I think the stuff he's famous for, as far as I know, which is very limited, is he kind of got in trouble because he like spent a lot of money to get sort of like anti-drug propaganda into like kids' scripts on TV and screenplay. People were like, why did you spend like $25 million reviewing scripts? And he was like, well, in this script, there was like 2 kids who'd use drugs and they were going to be cool, and I convinced them to make them like bad. And
right,
people
so
were like,
he's responsible for all those episodes of Saved by the Bell where somebody takes caffeine pills and goes to the hospital. Okay,
so I don't know if he was doing other stuff. I mean, presumably, if he was in the military in the late 80s and early 90s, he was doing some other stuff. The Gulf or something.
But this character, he like in the process of just getting his bearings in his new job, he also learns that his daughter, played by Erica Christensen, is herself using drugs and becoming addicted to drugs.
The swim fan herself.
Yeah, that's right. She's a swim fan herself, yeah.
I'm kind of like swim fan for the 2 of you. If the swim fan was murderously obsessed with Jesse Bradford out of utter revulsion.
Okay.
Okay.
So like kind of a
Kim fan, if you will.
Okay, great. Wow. Thank you. But she is in the miniseries, the daughter, the way this kicks off, because the analog to the Douglas character is like a cabinet minister or he's a guy.
Similarly, like he's like on the path to being the prime minister. Maybe he's like this up and coming,
but he's like in charge of drug policy,
right?
And he finds out that his daughter is using drugs when her friend dies in after a party, and so already we have like a softening, I think, of the story when it comes to the U.S. adaptation, because her friend just like freaks out and they try to dump him at the ER and drive away, and they get busted. And she's sort of being egged on by Topher Grace, playing very effectively like a very annoying character. Like the typical sort of white kid who's done enough drugs that he thinks he can like see the Matrix, you know?
Although I've never seen Topher Grace play a different kind of character.
I think that's probably right. I mean, he plays didn't he play David Duke in Black Klansman, which is just like a
type of annoying guy on
extremely an acceleration of that character. Yeah.
He kind of parodies himself also in the Ocean's films, which
he does come up in the Ocean's films.
Also maybe parodying other actors.
Yeah.
I was just going to say briefly, having been to a mostly white, expensive Catholic high school, I appreciated that the film has like the variety of types of people who are doing drugs. My school had plenty of drugs, which is like some people who will do a bunch of hard drugs and it basically doesn't affect their like career trajectory at all. They just skate by and everything is more or less fine. They're very close to getting in trouble and that's it. And then there's other people for whom it is like a life-changing thing that totally rewrites what they will do and who they have relationships with and who turns their back on them. So I think that part is fine for me.
Sorry to disagree with you, Ian, but I think that might be my least favorite part of the film, actually. The portrayal of demand, which is, it was interesting to hear that it was a sort of like Upper East Side sort of rich kid producer, because it captures that experience. And that was no doubt one experience that drove demand. But for a film that tries to portray at the macro level, supply, production, distribution, demand, like sort of all aspects of it in a way that comprehensively treats the drug problem in America, the demand side was pretty reductive, I thought. And there was a lot of rich kid malaise kind of talk throughout the film. You know, the daughter, Caroline, Erica Christensen's character, at one point she just says, "I'm angry about something."
Yeah.
And
that's really bad.
That's
I totally agree.
That's her big revelation in treatment. She's figured out she's having emotions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there's also this. They're high, talking on the couch. And they're like, "Oh, these social conventions that we use." It just really feels like 1990s teenage malaise that's driving drug demand. But at that point, by 2000, the profile of cocaine usage had completely changed, and it was well past a decade where the stereotypes invoked were outdated. So, 70s, 80s, you did have upper class cocaine usage. It was almost never freebasing or using crack. There was some of it, but not really. But by the mid 80s, the profile of the drug completely changes. You still see supply pretty high, but past month use prevalence, which is tracked by this big national survey, it just drops significantly. And it's pretty, like by 1990, it's broadly like lower socioeconomic people who are using cocaine and crack. And so this idea that it's rich kid malaise that's driving demand, it really struck me as the one part that was off about the film.
Oh, I don't worry, but I totally agree with you on basically everything you said. And I will also say that you haven't gotten to the parts in the storyline that I think reminded me of straight up chapters from your book where you're talking about like tropes about paranoia of heroin being like a corrupting influence specifically on women and like a by other races corrupting influence.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst scene in the movie and the worst scene in Soderbergh's career thus far. Let's just talk about it. We're here now. There's a scene. So her trajectory, the Caroline character's trajectory is like pretty classic after school special. Like not even once. If you try drugs, you will end up selling your body to get your next fix, and you'll be like a glazed-eyed husk of yourself. So, because she, in contrasted with the miniseries that is from fully 10 years earlier, where like, I mean, there's subtle differences, but like throughout this film, Caroline is being kind of fed drugs first by Topher Grace, who's then taking advantage of her, like, arguably assaulting her while she's incapacitated. And like in the miniseries, she is trying to get a fix herself and goes to her friend, and she's asking like, how can I get like a better high? And he reluctantly shows her how to shoot up. So she's driving the usage there. And in this film, it culminates with her being totally out of her mind, laying there while a black man has sex with her. And this is presented to us as like the lowest of the low, right? Like the worst thing that can happen to your white daughter is that she'll get hooked on drugs and it'll lead her to have sex with a black person. And then the guy gets up to go answer the door naked, and there's like graffiti on the wall of the place where he's staying and operating out of that literally says "Playa Bling Bling." Like,
I mean, this is the stuff that, among other things, drove me crazy. And it's not like, look, you can of course say there are people who are driven to things like sex work by substance abuse issues. I'm not saying that those things don't happen. But when you're making a Hollywood production that features like primarily one drug user, and you're repeating things that, to me, this is like straight out of Reefer Madness. This is the trope of like you're saying, use it once, lose your life, or like lose everything you care about. To add a tiny bit more nuance to the drug users that I knew in high school, I will also say that, not that they should be the protagonists of this story necessarily, but one of the people, to keep it extremely vague, that I knew who used drugs had a childhood playing around accident where one of his siblings died. And it was like one of the worst things that I'd ever heard about when I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
So to imagine that this is not somebody who's like, I'm angry and I don't know why I'm angry, sort of like extremely generic and condescending reductive malaise. This was somebody had something happen to them that changed the way that they looked at the possibility of being alive. And I think in Caroline, I don't think we get any of that stuff. It's just it's like teenage rebellion to like racial fear stuff, that the most tropey things you could imagine playing out.
Yeah. And I felt like all that stuff was pretty confined to like the demand story, like her story, like where it was coming from, but also where it led her. That whole segment of the movie, I just felt was just off. I mean, for a film that was trying to make sense of the drug trade in general. Maybe there was some self-consciousness about it. At one point, Michael Douglas is on a plane with a bunch of people, and there's someone from the FBI, there's someone from the DEA, and he's like, just give me some ideas. And he's like, is there anyone from treatment? There's no one from treatment. Mm-hmm, right. So I think that maybe there's a recognition that we don't understand the demand side of the equation that well. And that's illustrated quite well by Soderbergh himself.
Yeah.
What he does with the character Caroline. But yeah, no, I mean, it's, you guys covered it basically, like it's playing on some very old tropes, like even older than the crack scare in the 80s, right? Like this is something that goes back.
It's like King Kong
to
stuff.
The beginning
it's like
of the century.
1890.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, so when the first global efforts at drug interdiction were getting started, everyone was focused on opium, right?
Right.
Focused on opium and the Chinese. And very late in the game, the Harrison Act, which first outlawed opium and cocaine in the United States in 1914, they added cocaine to the bill. Well, why was that? It's because there was a fear that black men, and particularly like stevedores in the South, were using cocaine and raping white women. And there were testimonies in the American Journal of Medicine saying stuff like this and saying that it led to like a cocainized brain, whatever.
Yeah, and like that black men on cocaine were like literally bulletproof, I believe, was one belief. Yeah,
they changed the caliber of the bullet because they thought that black men were impervious to a certain small caliber bullet.
I mean, that's just like thinking about that dragons are real. Like that's so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things I really love about quick fixes is the way that you orient the demand for drugs in a context about what it is to live under capitalism. I mean, it always comes back to like the way that we use licit drugs to keep us able to work and then able to like calm down after work enough to go back to work, but also just like the identifying, I think in your book, you basically say that heroin is the best way to like stand capitalism. Like you do a decent job of selling me on heroin. But like we don't see any of that in the film. We see a girl who's, I mean, she mentions that she's like spread a little thin at school because she's like in the Spanish club and on the swim team or whatever. So like there's no other indication of like why somebody would want to use drugs except that they could have a reason. That's the real innovation of this film is like drug users sometimes they have stuff going on, you know?
I mean, it's a difficult problem to portray, I guess. I mean, it is a problem. Americans take far more drugs than any other country, right? Any other industrialized country, it's just like off the map. And trying to make sense of that's a difficult proposition. So I don't know. I mean, I guess there's something in the vagueness of Caroline's answers that does reflect the difficulty of the problem. But yeah, I mean, the whole character is just so flat that there's not much there's not many ways to go there.
Yeah, and we get like little hints of you mentioned in the politician scene. I mean, obviously in your book you do a nice job talking about Purdue and the Sacklers and stuff, but also throughout for example, the heroin chapter, you're discussing just like ongoing historical factors or relationships that are changing, and we should also, at least my reading of it is that we should also see them as inextricable. I think you give the example of, I think his name was Charles Henry Brent or something, like an early bishop in the Philippines who becomes this like anti-drug advocate and uses all this racialized language about I wish I could pull the quote, but something like
civilizing the Orient.
Exactly. And like people having like a constitutional tendency towards sensuality or something, like, you know, like it's built into who they are or something. To be wrapping all that up, colonial ideas, religious ideas, racial condescension, and the drug war, and be able to say like these are not like independent streams. This is like an ongoing active interconnection. I think that's maybe what I would have loved to see more of in the film.
Yeah, Charles Henry Brent, arguably the first drug czar in America. He was a representative to all the international conferences that got global prohibition treaties.
Is the czar thing, does that come out of like a finger in the eye of the Soviets? Like, why did we start calling them czars?
No idea, actually.
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I mean, you know, it's a fictive title. I mean, it's like it's like Doge, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'd have to go back. Like, who was the first drug czar? Maybe it was Jerome Jaffe under Nixon.
Because it's the Office of National Drug Policy or something. It's like the actual.
I think it's actually changed over time. I mean, maybe that's because offices have been merged. But I think it's just the guy who people look to deal with drug policy.
Right. I was just remembering the thing, it was like a week or two ago where, was it Pam Bondi who said that captured enough fentanyl to save like 168 million lives?
I'm sure they did those calculations very meticulously.
There's a similar number in this movie. In the speech at the end, Michael Douglas says, I mean, this I believe
68 million children.
But I think that's in the part of the speech that he no longer believes in or something. But still, like, that this is an urgent threat to every single person in the United States. There's also just like the implication that people who have drugs want to give them away for free to children to like just because they're demons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that too. Like, again, it's all kind of the demand side stuff that was taught in DARE education classes. Yeah. Like, you know, one hit and you're hooked for life. It's going to produce whole body orgasms. It's like something you never turn back from.
Yeah.
And then targeting children, of course.
So wait, that was supposed to make us not want to do drugs?
Yeah, I mean, there's my favorite book from, I think it's from the 70s sometime. The title's just, It's So Good, Don't Even Try It Once. And it's like, well, if it's that good.
Really bad campaign.
Have you seen Walk Hard? The film Walk Hard?
Oh, yes. There's the marijuana scene.
The recurring, like, you don't want any part of this. It's non-habit forming. It just makes you feel pretty good. Yeah. So that's like kind of the majority of the Douglas storyline. The
blue period
the
stuff.
Blue period, which I learned wasn't even, this is, you know, I'm out of my depth on some of the technical filmmaking stuff. This is not even a filter. This is what happens when you use tungsten film without a filter.
Yes.
Because apparently tungsten film is good for like night shooting, but you have to do something to it or else it looks really blue. And Soderbergh decided, what if I don't do that to it? It looks really blue. It looks all screwy. Next we have the Mexico section. And this film, I didn't realize, invented what has come to be called the shithole filter or the Mexico filter, which is where you use the color yellow to indicate that you are in the global south, in a place that is hot and dirty and dangerous, underdeveloped. But Soderbergh here just uses this really, really strong yellow color and also does something to the shutter to make things look really like gritty and grimy.
He says he uses a 45-degree shutter angle to give it a strobe-like feel also, which is why it's like kind of weird and jumpy.
I believe him that he did that. But like it looks, I mean, here, you know, he wasn't participating in the trend, and if no one had followed him afterward, it wouldn't have been a trend.
Yeah.
But he does, I mean, it makes Mexico look horrible. I mean, it looks like a place you don't want to go. It looks like it hurts to be there. And it's not, he talks about it as if these different colors help you track what storyline you're in. But then later in the film, when Benicio Del Toro goes to San Diego, he's not yellow anymore. And then there's a part, Ian, as you pointed out, where if you can describe it.
Where Michael Douglas's character being shown the border, and he puts up a pair of binoculars and looks across, and it like activates the Mexico filter to be looking into Mexico.
Yeah. It reminded me of the movie Annihilation, where they like look into the like shimmery alien cloud thing. Yeah, it's like Mexico is literally like that over there.
I mean, I would say, like you're saying, first of all, it's not a trend yet, so that gives him a little bit of protection to say like he's just trying to do something. And when the scenes are scenes like the torture scene or like the weird sort of paramilitary guys out in the desert, it's such a like intense visual feel that I appreciate it just as like a filmic technique in isolation. It's
certainly like when they're out in the desert, the first use of it makes it feel like you're in the hot middle of nowhere, and like that's fine with me. And they shot that in New Mexico in the US.
Well, and then when you're in Mexico City flying over the Zócalo, and it's like every building, because of this filter, is now made to be the same, right? A bank is a residential building, is like the National Museum or whatever. There is in Mexico, it's all like this, and it's all pretty bad.
Well, and he even talks about how they got lucky because it rained like 3 days before they shot this, and apparently it was the clearest Mexico City had been in like 4 years.
Okay.
So they could have had the most beautiful footage of Mexico City anyone had ever shot.
Yeah.
But they made it all look like piss. There's a great Mashable video explaining
this is a really nice video,
this filter and like how this all works, and they talk to like actual color graders who say this is like a deliberate choice. So we'll link that. But yeah, this decision because this version of, or this aspect of the story in the miniseries focuses not on a cop, because Benicio Del Toro is a Tijuana police officer who's sort of caught in this moral conundrum. In this sort of supply aspect of the story in the miniseries is about a Pakistani opium farmer who like has a family, and they talk about how much more sugar you would have to grow to make the same amount of money.
20 acres compared to 1 acre of poppy.
And they get into the nitty gritty of like international funding for agriculture based on like what you're growing. I mean, it's like, it's so much more
tapped
crazy into why people why anyone would grow drugs in the first place. Like, because they're trying to feed their fucking kids.
Unfortunately, I mean, Ben, if you liked the market forces discussion in the film version of Traffic, the miniseries stuff, I mean, it has its own problems, and like visually it looks like a 1989 British TV show, but it just blows it out of the water. We're talking like 5 minutes into the miniseries. They're saying, okay, well, the way we've tried to address the drug problem is just like by building infrastructure so that it's even feasible for people to do other things. Just talking about like the existence of being in a country like Pakistan and facing this uphill battle to say, you know, like for people who are supplying, they're not demons. They're people who are trying to make choices. And then, like you said, Jake, they'll call out specifically like, well, what about all this British and American aid? And they say, well, it goes to British and American experts who show up here and talk about like what we should be doing instead. It's just like being recycled between you guys, basically.
Right. Well, to be fair to Soderbergh, I think he made the choice to focus on distributors rather than producers.
Yeah.
And for producers, there are those economic incentives. Like it's just, you just make so much more. It's like a pretty reliable crop. But for the distributors who are, typically squeezing the producers, it is a very violent trade. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And, I think that there have been times where it's been more or less violent, but, there's something quasi-fair about his portrayal there on the distributor side, which is that it does get extremely violent at that level. That's where the money's made. And that's where the violence is too.
And that violence, would you say, is like a result of the illegality of it? Does the violence stem from the criminalizing the industry? Because like we don't at least see as much violence between like, cardboard box manufacturers or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you push something underground and make it an illegal market, you're bound to see different kinds of market behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great book by Philippe Bourgois called In Search of Respect, where he tries to make sense of the crack trade in the Barrio. And he basically argues that violence is almost a form of like self-branding in an illegal market. And it has a kind of market logic. It's not like people are being violent for no reason. They're being violent to send a message to certain people. They're being violent in order to make sure that their business like stays afloat, right? It's not just random violence. And I think that there's something similar about, he's just talking about sort of lower level distributors, but there's something true about the bigger ones as well. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things that happens when you push something very profitable underground.
Yeah, I mean, in the film, we get characters like there's the sort of the two primary like violent cartel associated people. There's Salazar, the general who is also working for. He's like tied to Porfirio Madrigal, who's the head of the Juarez cartel, played by Tomas Milian, who's a Cuban actor who we've seen before in the film Havana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cuban-American actor. So he's kind of, he reminded me of like Hans Landa, the character from Inglourious Bastards. He's a real like flamboyant sort of smiling, I'm going to be your friend in a way that's so scary.
Yep.
I do like the performance, although it feels kind of cartoonish. And then you also have Clifton Collins Jr. as Frankie Flowers, who is the sort of, talking about tropes, he's the gay psychopath who we've seen in many, many films. And he's like a sicario who touches a number of the threads of the film. But like that guy, I mean, that's the classic like drug movie. This is a place where someone who is basically like the Joker can make a life for themselves by like being employed to do violence.
Yeah.
And I mean, how often does that actually happen? I wouldn't hire this guy. He seems crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Ben, you're talking about violence being a real thing. I want to be clear. I live in Mexico, and my partner's family lives in like northern to central Mexico, where there's a lot more drug violence. And I'm not saying that this stuff doesn't exist, but I do think it's interesting. For example, this film comes out in 2000. It makes the absolutely ludicrous claim that there's like nobody in Mexico who's ever heard of drug enforcement or something.
Right.
Which is just factually incorrect. But
actually, the guy who was in charge of that was like some of the basis for the Salazar character. So they knew. They just lied. Yeah.
Yeah. But if we want to point out something interesting, you're asking about like how this becomes violence. The well-known thing, at least in Mexico, is that you had people like Vicente Fox, who's in power in the early 2000s. And the drug deaths, at least reported drug deaths, are in the like high hundreds to 1,000 or something around there, based on my memory. And then you get Felipe Calderon comes into power, puts out 6,000 military people to do like what the DA wants to do in this movie. They're talking about like if we had unlimited training, unlimited resources for enforcement, that's what this dude does. And the deaths in his presidential term are 50 to 100,000 or something. I mean, the amount that it increases within 6 years is like astronomical. Very difficult to even wrap your head around how it changes for people just like day to day experiencing the drug war.
That statistic is deaths related to drugs?
Yes.
Deaths, okay.
Deaths related to drug trafficking, I think specifically.
Okay. And so how many of those people, we just can't know how many of those people were machine gunned by his own police, right?
No, we have no idea how many of these are like civilian deaths or whatever this is. Obviously the classics of I have a friend who was in the Mexican military during that period, and he had like I think I've told this story maybe on the Mule episode a long time ago, but he had like a sergeant who sent them to clear out one cartel stuff, and then like a lieutenant who sent them to clear out the other cartel stuff because they were just both connected to different cartels. I mean, the idea of bringing violence and pretending that it's not going to be corruptible. I mean, you in your book, Ben, you talk plenty about I forget what the name of the early like DEA, Federal Narcotics something.
Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Yeah,
incredibly, impossibly corrupt
FBN.
Precursor to the DEA, and in that time they were just making up numbers. I mean, it was just whatever they wanted them to be.
And also like actively selling heroin, I think you said somewhere, like maybe it was cocaine, I forget what it was. Dealing drugs.
Well, the FBN, there were a few corrupt agents. There was some book about the FBN that said that it was the worst case of federal corruption in American history, which is kind of saying something.
Yeah, cool.
Internationally, the CIA was very involved with running drugs, and there's a link there. Harry Anslinger, the head of the FBN, was in the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which is the precursor to the CIA. So it's like kind of an old boys club. They all knew each other. But I mean, to your point, yeah. I mean, so to say that there is violence and extreme violence in the illegal drug trade is not to say that it's always violent. I think that this is one thing that movies do make too much of. As with any business, most of it, 90% of it's built on trust. And if you're constantly violent, you're not going to be doing business. And so there's like a strategic use of it in order to make a point, and because it's not a legal market. But it's definitely overplayed in general, the violent aspect of the drug trade. A lot of it's very quiet and very boring. These big so-called cartels, like they kind of operate on principles you could learn in business school. And for the most part, they want it to be quiet, and they keep it quiet.
I mean, that's in The Wire. That's like a major plot point. It's when Stringer Bell goes to business school. Yeah, it's so fascinating because I went to Mexico for the first time last year to visit my friend Ian, who lives there. And obviously, I know intellectually that basically everything you hear about Mexico and the U.S. is bullshit. But you also just get there, and it's like, I mean, there are so many Americans who think that Mexico is just an active war zone at all times, when it's just like everybody. This guy's like going to the market, and like this is a kid playing soccer, and this guy over there is a dentist, and like how people live here.
Right. Most people are just living here. Yeah.
Yeah, just like in the U.S. I mean, I had a friend who it was after one of the terror attacks on like a Christmas market in Germany, 7 years ago, and I was planning a trip to like Denmark. He's like, how can you go to Europe? It's like so dangerous. What are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
So
just
I think
poor understanding of statistics, maybe.
Part of that unique American broken brainedness that you describe in the book, I think extends also to just the paranoia. So this character is Javier is a Tijuana policeman who is sort of basically given the opportunity to start working with the corrupt general and with his partner Manolito, and he sort of sees an opportunity to basically play. He's kind of Jackie Browning the two different sides off each other. We just talked about Jackie Brown on our Patreon. He's sort of playing them against each other in order to basically like get public works money. Like he's a guy who, I mean, this is one of the more compelling parts of the movie to me, is that he finds a way to like redirect this unlimited funds going to the war on drugs and turn it into like lights for a baseball stadium. But at the same time, I mean, he's like a heroic cop character. This is something that we don't care for on the show. But I was thinking about something that you say in your book, Ben. That's that one of the like kind of structuring assumptions is that drug policy is not about drugs. And so does this ring true as like, does it feel like that money is being taken out of things that are good for people, like lights at the baseball stadium, and put into drug enforcement as a reason to take the money out, if that makes sense? Like is this like redirectable money? Yes. You're saying? Yeah. Is the war on drugs an excuse to defund other things?
It's certainly redirectable money. I guess I think about it somewhat differently, though. If we did redirect all the money going to drug enforcement, say to social services or social provisioning of some kind, it wouldn't go very far in creating something like the basics of a European social welfare state. You just need to spend a lot more on social welfare to actually have it work than you need to do on prohibition and enforcement. And so I think part of the thing that's actually attractive about mass incarceration and about policing and whatnot, as opposed to actually funding social services and baseball stadiums for kids and whatnot, is that it is in the long run a cheaper option than a robust social welfare state. And I think that's oftentimes lost in these debates. That being said, I think that there's still good reason to redirect those funds. The baseball part at the end, I can't say it rung true with me though, for I guess different reasons, which is that there's this great book by Sam Quinones called Dreamland, and he was one of the first to document the sort of like new heroin trade post opioid crisis. And he does a good job of the basics, just sort of tracking where stuff comes from. And that's a very nonviolent trade, actually. It's very, very quiet, sort of outside of the big cities. And so you don't really see much violence there.
That's the Nayarit trade that you talk about, right?
Yes, right.
In your book. Yeah.
And, but at the end he says, well, what are we going to do about this? Like, how do we save America? And he offers a very similar answer. He's just like, we need to like get together for community baseball games and whatnot.
Yeah.
And along with the appeal to family at the very end, where Michael Douglas says, like, how can we wage a war on our families or on the people we know? The upshot of the film really seems like, well, we just need to rebuild communities in America. And to my mind, it's like, well, yes, but there's preconditions of doing so. Like, how about you give us healthcare first, and then we can rebuild communities? There's really basic problems in the United States that, people just glaze over when they say, oh, if only we like knew our neighbors. If only we went to kids' baseball games. Like, okay, that stuff's good, but it's the effect of a functional society. It's not the thing that's going to make people functional.
Yeah, I need labor protections so that I can like have time to go to the baseball game.
Yeah.
And like I need the people at the baseball game not to have concealed Tech 9s under their jackets. There's like preconditions.
Yeah, and if you're talking about like the expense of this stuff, it is expensive, and people obviously Americans have a real like knee-jerk resistance to new spending that comes out of their tax dollars. But I also think it's important.
I waste a lot of money.
I was going to say that it's important to remember that I think back of the napkin math that I read sometime was like it's like $6,000 per person or something in Sweden to pay for their healthcare system. So that's a lot of money, but it's also, if you're talking about how much money we have as a nation that we have in like expendable luxury income, that we also end up being stressed about healthcare all the time, and you can't depend on the healthcare state, and you're worried about losing your insurance, and that becomes like a labor issue because then you're stuck in jobs that you don't want to lose. And I don't know, to me, that registers as a small enough figure that I think, if we're talking about how do you approach this stuff and create the type of welfare society that makes people feel like, hey, you know what? No matter what happens to me, I'm going to have healthcare. I'm going to have access to some type of housing that's not going to be totally miserable. I'm going to have, these sorts of protections. Maybe, you certainly know more about it than I do, Ben, but it seems to me that even like poorer countries manage to avoid these problems sometimes by not having like quite a dramatic drop for people that's like threatening you all the time.
For sure. And I think that that's part of the uniqueness of the American situation and part of the difficulty in defining why precisely Americans take so many drugs. There's obvious things to point to, like the excesses of the American pharmaceutical industry, but on the demand side, we are a rich country, the United States. Like it doesn't make sense from one level, and you don't see a similar kind of drug excess in Europe. Like it's not across the board there like it is here. And I think part of it is just the absolute insanity of people who are fairly well-to-do by certain standards still avoiding the doctor like the plague because they're worried about their medical bills. It's an insane society to live in where you've got that dream of wealth while you lack the like very basic social provisioning. And I think that kind of instability is part of what fuels Americans' love of drugs.
I think that's what's frustrating to me about the section involving Caroline is that we just don't have, there's no one with precarity using drugs in the film. Even the guy who is having sex with her and dealing, he seems like he's got his life together. This is like a powerful figure within his realm. And so like we just don't see anybody who's like between a rock and a hard place for any reason other than that they're hooked on smack.
Yeah. In that sense, it very much struck me as it's like 90s ad buster kind of politics. It's like very much feeds into the anti-consumerist critique. Oh, we've got too much, and as a result of that, we've got malaise and a lack of purpose, and that's why we're taking drugs. And that's all we sort of get from the character Caroline.
It's interesting that 20th Century Fox was the first place that they took the movie, the pitch, and they were scared to get involved with it because they were dealing with the fallout from Fight Club.
Oh, wow.
And so they were scared about another movie with like
social
controversial
or something.
subject matter.
Wait, what was the fallout from Fight Club? That was a success, wasn't it?
It was not a commercial success in the theater. It was a enormous DVD. Like it was because every college kid had a copy of it. But it also, reading the Rebels on the Backlot book, the intelligentsia just like lost their fucking shit over Fight Club. Like they could not handle, people talked about it as if it was, you know, like a Godard movie where the whole thing was just text on the screen telling you to kill your dad.
Yeah.
Like it was, it was such a threat to people with columns.
Shout out to where I grew up, Menlo Park, California. I got in the news at the time because it had the first Fight Club that started as a response to Fight Club.
Oh,
and
hell yeah.
people used that as like, look at what it's doing to suburban America. It's just like turning people into wackos, this movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's really impossible to imagine being that threatened by the movie Fight Club. But yeah, this is the milieu where this movie comes out, right? Do we have other thoughts about the Javier storyline? Ian, do you have any opinions?
There's something that I have to
about
address.
Benicio Del Toro's performance?
I do.
Academy Award-winning performance in the film.
Yeah, this is, to any person who is like semi-native speaker of Spanish, this movie is insane. The very first words that are part of this movie are Javier talking to his partner. I know it sounds like I'm doing like Cinema Sins critiques or something of like nitpicking little issues, but I gotta tell you, if you speak Spanish and you know what Mexican Spanish sounds like, if you know what any actually human spoken Spanish sounds like on the planet Earth, this Spanish is so weird. Benicio Del Toro is a Puerto Rican man doing what I can only assume he believes to be Northern Mexican Spanish.
He did a lot of research. He like shadowed people and stuff.
I don't know what he was doing.
He had a dialect coach.
This person needs to be like under criminal investigation.
Embezzlement.
He sounds a little bit Colombian to me, and I double checked this. Just, you know, like I have been speaking Spanish for a long time, but I checked it with my native Mexican girlfriend. I was like, where do you think this person is from? Blind, didn't show her the screen. She's like, maybe Colombia or Venezuela. Yeah. I don't know. Okay. And then she says, wait a second. He said chingado. She's like, why is he using like Mexican vocabulary? It's like so bizarre. And unfortunately, the people he's surrounded by, I think, are doing fine. The actor who plays Barrio, I think is the other cop's name. Is that right?
Manolo.
Yeah, Manolo. He is. Yeah. He's like a Mexican-American or Chicano person, so it's also recognizably not a Mexican person speaking Spanish, but maybe that kind of works for the character. And then
it's Tijuana too. It's like he could have conceivably.
But then you were talking about the Cuban-American who is doing, I would say, the equivalent of like Doctor Strange level American accent, where you're like, okay, I know like this is a Mexican accent. Like somebody's trying to do a Mexican accent, and that's fine. But I think it's like so far into the runtime before you get a Mexican person speaking Mexican Spanish on screen, which
I think it's Selma Hayek showing up for a day uncredited as a favor.
I told you it's startling to hear her speak because she is speaking Mexican Spanish and like doing a character, not like trying to speak Mexican. She's just like using that as a platform to act, not as something she's striving to do. So look, I don't say all this to just like totally shit on the movie, but if we're concerned about how it's flattening Mexico and maybe not really concerned with Mexico as a place where real people live, this is like specific nuanced experiences. I don't know, man. Hire some people who are from Mexico and have them play Mexican characters.
Well, it was like part of the stipulation when they were looking for a studio. They really wanted the parts in Mexico to be in Spanish. That was very important to them. And they like hid this from USA Films, who only figured it out when somebody was looking at an invoice for a Spanish dialect coach.
Wow.
So somebody tried to teach Benicio. I'm excited. I haven't seen Che. I'm excited to see what his Spanish sounds like in Che.
I'm also I liked Che when I watched it, but I didn't speak as much Spanish back then. So I don't know what it's going to sound like.
I live in Los Angeles. I was born here. I've spent almost my entire life here. I've interacted with a lot of people who speak Mexican Spanish and English as a second language. I've never heard anybody say "I believe."
Even his. I mean, part of it is just Benicio Del Toro is such like an unusual human being. So
I love him. He's a weird guy.
Me too. But I couldn't believe. To hear this, I couldn't believe that this got an Academy Award. I mean, it has to be that probably 10% of the Academy are Spanish speakers or something, if that. It's really weird.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, maybe one last word about Benicio del Toro's character. I do think the sort of flat morally perfect cop character goes into that reduction of Mexico's significance in the film, because you don't, I mean, by the end, he just wants baseball for the kids, but you don't really understand why. There's no backstory there.
Right.
Like, his own motivations seem like he's brilliant, capable, but what his character arc is, it's pretty undeveloped other than being this sort of flawless moral force.
Well, apparently for a lot of the production process, a lot of the pre-production rather, this character ends up becoming like a cartel leader. He's like a full villain, and he sort of tricks Salazar and gets him arrested so that he can ascend to control his operation. And Del Toro pushed back on this and said, like, this is tropey, this is a stereotype. I would like to base the character on a Tijuana cop that I met who tries very hard to like ride the line and not step on the toes of the corrupt guys so that he can try to be a good cop, So like it I wonder if it's underwritten because it literally was like a last minute decision, or if
that's possible.
Because Soderbergh talks about him becoming the moral center of the film, which
he's such a cipher that it's hard to say that.
Right. The scene where he's eating like a freeze pop and enjoying it, that's terrific.
That's humanity.
I mean, I don't think that's acting.
Yeah.
He does just look. Yeah. That's what it looks like when you eat one of those.
Yeah. Very briefly, I just want to shout out. I said to you, Jake, there's an Alex Cox film called El Patrullero in Spanish. I think it's called like Highway Patrol or something in English. This film came out in 1991, so basically a decade before this, and it's a Brit shooting a film in Mexico that basically just comes across as like a Mexican film. It's also an Alex Cox film that exists in that type of weird Rebo Man, like kind of absurd world, but it's not like you couldn't do this. There were people who could go make a film with a Mexican cast. I don't know who the screenwriter on that movie is. I assume it's somebody who had a good understanding of Mexico. And, you can even maintain your stylistic, like recognizable signature and still make a movie that is in a country and I think that movie is very good. It just looks like Mexico in 1990 or 1991. And I don't know, for it to be like so thoroughly disproven, it's not like white people can't wrap their heads around like what is Mexico or something, or a white director can't possibly see what is this other country. It's very possible.
I mean, I think you might have to be an Alex Cox level, know who was good and bad in Nicaragua, kind of.
Sure.
There's a basic level of understanding that you need to have in order to make a good Mexico movie, maybe.
That may be true. But it's also about a cop who wrestles with the drug trade and wrestles with like taking bribes and sort of vacillates about that. And I think has much more moral complexity and recognizable humanity in a person. But
well, I gotta say, the camera filter used in Mexico in this film is objectionable. But if they were making a film about Arizona in the summer and they used that filter, I'd be totally okay with it. It captures the experience.
Yeah, well,
it's sensationally effective.
Some of it, I think, was shot in Arizona. Like a lot of it was in Nogales because like the insurance company wouldn't let them shoot in Tijuana itself. But like, it was New Mexico and Arizona. I was thinking, of course, about Sicario, which also ends with a youth sports scene, if I recall correctly.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I think there's a soccer game, because remember there's a kind of a...
there's also a cop and his son's playing soccer at the end,
and they hear gunshots and everyone stops and looks up for a second and they go back to the game, and it's like, this is what life is like in Juarez. But Benicio Del Toro is in that as well. Ian, I would love if you could rewatch that and give me a read on his accent there. I believe he's supposed to be from Medellin.
Okay, well, maybe at least if he tried to do his Mexican accent, he would land kind of close to that.
I do have like a stuck in my head. There's a moment in that film where his character is interviewing he's like talking to a bunch of detained immigrants to try to get some information about something. He's asking them where they're from, and one guy, or like where they came through, and one guy says Arizona. And I just remember Benicio Del Toro saying, Arizona. And like that is how I hear the name of the state. I don't know.
That's good. That's beautiful.
I have mental illness.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that is most of that storyline. Yeah. Of course, there's the great scene in the pool where he goes to be safe. But that is in San Diego vision. So it's time for us to move to San Diego.
Let's do it.
This storyline concerns, what is her name in the film? Helena Ayala, who is the pregnant wife of a seemingly upstanding San Diego businessman. She lives in, it looked like, I mean, the houses are bigger, but it looks like Paranormal Activity to me. Like the sort of Southwest, like master planned McMansion community.
Yep.
Her husband, who I think is in Scarface. I think he's like one of the sort of smaller players in Scarface.
Yeah, I think he's also in, speaking of Mexico Filter, Breaking Bad at some point.
Probably.
Yeah.
He is arrested after first there's a raid by Don Cheadle and Luis Guzman, who are the best part of the film because they're just like hanging out, having a good time.
Gems. I wrote down basically all of their lines. They live in like this little Sam Beckett play about like try to quit smoking or something. I don't know. I liked all that stuff.
And so first they bust Miguel Ferrer. The joke scene is so good. And like Miguel Ferrer is so winning that this almost like this humanizes the like people involved in drug distribution more than anything else in the movie. This is just like a guy in his office and he likes a joke.
I mean, Miguel Ferrer, I think he's also just great in here. And like you're saying, if the rest of the movie had this sort of mix of pulpy thriller, but also maybe trying to recognize humans in the drug trade and that they're a weird mix of businessmen who don't see a problem with what they do or like come up with a justification for it. Yeah, I thought his character's also very good.
I mean, there's a weird element to it where like in the miniseries, it's German guys distributing from Pakistani guys. Like it's there's a racialized and like there's obviously like the element of the Eurocentrism of it comes in, where here we do have, I guess, more white passing Latin men who are the distributors, which isn't remarked upon. Catherine Zeta-Jones of it all obviously kind of complicates things. So she's his wife. She's really pregnant in real life, but also so they made the character pregnant in the movie. And suddenly she finds herself like without any money because Eduardo Ruiz, the Miguel Ferrer character, which is almost the same name as the Luis Guzman character in The Limey.
Yeah,
really
that's true.
Doesn't matter. He turns. So suddenly she doesn't have any money and she has to decide, how am I going to take care of my kid and my unborn child? She's got a lascivious lawyer, Arnie Metzger, played by Dennis Quaid, who is naturally creepy, so he's great. And so she decides to sort of take over her husband's business because otherwise she is not going to be able to continue the life she has, and also people are threatening her kid. What do we think of this part?
I agree that the Don Cheadle, Luis Guzman like bits were some of the best in the film. Miguel Ferrer is great, and I think that you're right to say that you can see the human aspect here, or he's willing to portray the human aspect in a way that, like, for Benicio Del Toro, we don't really get that. He's just the moral center without, like, human affects. And even for Michael Douglas, I mean, it's not really clear what drives him. He's almost just a cipher for all the sort of political stuff that goes on in D.C. That being said, I did find Catherine Zeta-Jones's character to be equally kind of baffling. I mean, A, that she doesn't know anything about her husband's business before he's arrested. But then B, that she turns into such a villainous character herself as a result of it. It just seems, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's again, like part of the late 90s anti-consumerist malaise critique, which is that she just loves being a country club member so much that she's willing to kill people.
Yeah, duck salad.
Yeah.
It's all
for duck salad.
I mean, in the miniseries, the character played by Lindsay Duncan, obviously it's like 6 hours long, so there's more time to develop things. Her character, I think, is like a former Olympic swimmer who's now frustrated that she's like kind of a trophy wife, and she has a lot longer to debate, am I going to get involved with this? And then like, can we get rid of this guy without killing him? Okay, let's kill him. So she has like more time to slowly break bad. And Soderbergh also talks about how the first cut of the movie was like 3 hours and 45 minutes long or something. Wow. So there's a lot chopped out of it. I haven't seen all of the unused footage, so maybe there's more there, but she does seem to sort of abruptly become bloodthirsty. There's kind of, I guess, like a mama bear thing going on where as soon as her kid gets threatened, she'll do anything, I suppose.
Yeah. I I like the first half of her story a lot better because to me it comes across. I mean, first of all, we haven't talked about like the color cueing for this part. I think he used like a diffusion filter and
then he flashed the negative.
Yeah,
which
so
is,
you expose it to light before it's processed,
which is dangerous, and like you're not supposed to tell the Bond company that you're doing this.
Yeah.
It's like this is the directing equivalent of doing heroin. Like this is cowboy shit.
I think he jokes about like somebody on set warning him, like, just so you know, like shooting that window and with the process you're going to do, you're like 11 points overexposed. And he's sort of like, yeah, I know, whatever. We're just going to try it and see how it works out. I think that's cool.
I mean, there's lots of parts of this movie that look like full on documentary. We can't control how the light is going to look, but that was sort of deliberate. But yeah, sorry.
No. I mean, and to me, that stuff works. It gives it this like, on the one hand, looks the closest to recognizable reality for us, the viewer, which I think, you know, if you're picking the average suburban viewer of the movie Traffic, I think to say like, okay, you live in this world where drugs are kind of an abstract concept and you're maybe concerned about social climbing or something. And that stuff was fine for me. And then there's like this slight distortion to the light where it gives us the sense that this is like a false fantasy that people are living in, or particularly these people. But I agree with you that the turn, I also wrote down Catherine Zeta-Jones, Walter White, because she goes from like this person that we understand trying to protect her kids, trying to figure out what to do, has never heard, like you said, has never heard of her husband being involved in the drug trade at all, and seems genuinely upset that that's like part of his life, to being the one who is masterminding this assassination and going to Tijuana to meet with also non-Mexican Benjamin Bratt. But I think, you know, to me, it's so fast. And maybe that is just totally a function of the edit, that maybe this is the most, maybe I'm supposed to just enjoy this as like the pulpy part of the movie. Like see how, you know, a suburban wife could become a criminal mastermind.
Yeah. I mean, this is the part that I noted the most like direct lift from the source material. Like there's lines in the courtroom, the whole thing with the secretary who worked at a company that didn't exist. Like that's straight out. That's line for line out of the miniseries.
I also liked almost all the secondary characters or like tertiary characters in the movie ring true, or I enjoy them. That secretary lady.
That's the Soderbergh special, you know? I
liked, I forget, D.W. Moffat or something. The guy who plays the like drug czar advisor in the first, in the Wakefield section. The guy who says like, I'm not political, I'm an issues guy or something. He's like, you know, I think maybe that's a little bit tropey, but rings true for some of the people I'm aware of in DC, thinking of themselves as like apart from politics, despite everything they do being involved with politics.
I just remembered in 2018, Catherine Zeta-Jones starred as real-life Colombian drug lord Griselda Blanco in the Lifetime television film Cocaine Godmother.
Whoa, I don't know about
So
this.
she went back to pretending to be Latina, interestingly. Yeah, I mean, the courtroom stuff is the most like pulpy and the most sort of, you know, Hollywood kind of smarter thriller aspect of the film. The whole sequence where she wants to have Miguel Ferrer killed and then it doesn't go quite right, and then the partner ends up turning on the car with the bomb strapped to it. That's straight out of the miniseries, and like that also feels sort of contrived. That feels Hollywood, you know?
Yeah. And that's the part where she's screaming on the cell phone to just like kill him.
Shoot him in the head.
I mean, that I guess I'm trying to think of how they could have done her character to make it a little bit more believable. And there's like an alternative universe wherein she's convinced to do things that are against her own morals, but she also wants to like save her family and go back to her old life. That I think is like more believable. But like when she's going down to Mexico and presenting this like high pressured
doll
cocaine, like talking in the technical jargon that she would not know otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense. And that that was one of the more infuriating details to me as well. The idea that some new technology for delivering cocaine was going to save her. It's like, It's not like there's a lot of technological wizardry in the drug industry. Like you just need to be able to package it and ship it across the border. You know, like the idea that some new technological fix that her husband created that saves the family is kind of ridiculous.
I mean, that's such a movie. I think that's the end of Cheech and Chong has the same thing where they end up figuring out how to make the whole car out of weed or something. This has been around.
It's And it does play into the like drug dealers as preying on children thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Project for the children.
Yeah.
Right. When she's a mom. It doesn't also read terribly believable to me that a pregnant woman would want to do this, would feel like okay making dolls out of pure cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
There's some sort of weird stuff on the commentary too, where Soderbergh talks about how pregnant Catherine Zeta-Jones was like one of the more emotionally stable people in the crew, which like I guess is nice of him to say, but sort of a weird implication. Yeah. Do we have thoughts about this, about her, about...
I think he said in one of the interviews from the interview book we draw from all the time that he was employing some techniques, I think flashing specifically. Maybe he was borrowing from Bound for Glory, which we've talked about on this podcast before.
Sure.
Which, I don't know, I think it's funny to hear that he's drawing from like Costa Gavras, and he's drawing from Hal Ashby, and he's drawing or Haskell Wexler or whatever, and from Ken Loach. And I don't want to make it sound like I hate this whole movie. There are parts of it where I would forget for sequences that I had been frustrated by something previously. Right. And it's so formally engaging and at some specific points well acted. And there's, you know, the things people loved about this movie. There's like so many moving parts to sort of like keep your eye moving, whatever, you know, like a game of tennis or something. You're just bouncing back and forth. And that stuff works briefly. But I guess I'm just shocked that all of that technical knowledge was employed for the sake of what is often, like you're saying, like a after school special style concern. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. He wins the Oscar for this. He's nominated for directing 2 films, for Aaron Brockovich and Traffic, and assumes that he won't win because he thinks that he'll split his own vote. And so when he does win, he gives what is now considered like one of the greatest Oscar speeches, which he thinks is silly because he was apparently drunk. But Tom Cruise hands him his Oscar, and he says some stuff about he's going to thank people privately. And he says, what I want to say is I want to thank anyone who spends part of their day creating. I don't care if it's a book, a film, a painting, a dance, a piece of theater, a piece of music. Forgot podcasts. Anybody who spends part of their day sharing their experience with us, I think this world would be unlivable without art, and I thank you. And it's funny to say that when you're winning for this movie, like, because that is so without politics. That's just like, you know, make a musical about people having a good time at the park, which, like, that's fine.
I mean, if he had said,
much,
if he had won for Sex, Lies, and Videotape and given a speech like that, something that's just like personal, indulgently artistic in a way that I love and think is incredible.
Yeah, just about human experience. Like, there's plenty of room for art that's about individual experience, but this movie is so ideological that, like, that feels like, did you do any of this on purpose?
Or,
you know,
is it though? It's like, I sent you the other quote from a different interview. I think this one is from a Village Voice interview with Dennis Lim. And reflecting on the film, he says, I didn't want to come off like we had answers. The idea that some silly filmmaker after 2 years could sort it out would be outrageous. But there seems to be a huge vacuum in the public debate, and I guess this is one of the few times I felt a movie could actually help. The funny thing is, everybody who sees it thinks it puts their point of view across, and I was expecting exactly the opposite. We had a screening in Washington for Customs, DEA, and the Department of Justice, and they all came out saying they really liked it. The following night, there was some hardcore lefty NPR PBS screening in LA, and some guy stands up and says, thank you for making the first pro-legalization movie. So, you know, that he talks about like his stoner friends, like
Up in Smoke or Still Smoking.
I mean, I was joking with you, Jake, about the idea that NPR types are like hardcore leftists. I think is indicative of some ideas about what the Overton window is. But I don't know. I think it's funny that he sees this as like adding things to the conversation. And in fairness, we've said that maybe the mainstream conversation was lacking enough that it did do some of that. Certainly the critics at the time talk about it being like unusually nuanced, but
yeah, people saw it as like an issues movie, and like, you know, it's smart. You're smart if you like this movie. You're doing a good thing by watching it and thinking about
maybe
these
it's
ideas.
Unfair to say this from 2025 to say most of this feels like kind of you could have found this analysis elsewhere and also found analysis that went deeper than this elsewhere. But I wonder if he does think of this as like having a specific ideological points, or if he is maybe doing more of what you were saying at the beginning, Ben, of just like bringing in these opinions and just showing them on screen and feeling like, well, just showing the strangeness of having politicians in a room talking about the drug war from all these different perspectives, or hearing Border Patrol people talk about it. Is that just like enough as a project to say all of this is happening in the broad landscape of the war on drugs?
I think it actually makes sense that it would be seen or be received as both conventional and edgy at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it just has to do with the flatness of the portrayals that we've been discussing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if Catherine Zeta-Jones hadn't done a complete 180 and all of a sudden became bloodthirsty, and it was more about, you know, marginal immoral choices she made in order to get her life back that maybe work in some ways, maybe don't work in others, or if there was a even like not the character of Caroline at all. let's just bracket that character. Yeah. Or if, you know, if Michael Douglas's character had, you know, I mean, his story was just so dramatic as well. It was way too personal for being drug czar. If he had just been more marginally affected by things not working in his position, which is a more professional rather than personal concern, mm-hmm. I think actually the movie would have had more objections, because then it would have portrayed something that was difficult to understand and didn't really have any clear conclusions. I mean, you can leave this movie and say, oh, that's bad. Mm-hmm. Or, this is good. Right. Whereas I think the reality of the drug trade, it's just a lot messier. And so if he had kept some of the elements, but fleshed out the characters a little bit more to portray more real life moral circumstances, I think it would have been less satisfying to both the DEA and all those lefties at NPR. You know?
Yeah, those NPR Bolsheviks.
I love this movie that you're describing. I would love to see this other traffic.
I mean, it would be great to have depiction of like someone who's been incarcerated for a nonviolent drug offense, who was probably put there perhaps by the judge from Cincinnati, mm-hmm. you know,
or Joe Biden.
Yes, exactly. Or his friends from Thurmond. They come up in your book, Ben. Yeah. And it would be great to see. There was apparently like a Colombian coca farmer who was cut out of the script at an early stage. It would be great to see someone else using drugs. Maybe like there's probably somebody who works for this judge using drugs on the weekend, and just like thinking like, what is it? What's involved in me getting this bump for my Saturday night out? You know, all of this is kind of left out in a movie that does feel sprawling and somehow still small.
Yeah. I think it'd be a really interesting time to remake a movie like Traffic.
Well, I mean, now it'd be a limited series probably, and so you could have so much more space. Yeah, and it would actually physically look different if it was trying to portray contemporary drug trafficking. So much is in the synthetics trade now, so it's no longer even like Soil and Seasons. It's just these big labs that pop up and create a huge batch. And then, so it just looks very different. Supply is much smaller because it's more potent synthetics. And so you don't even need to go through containers sometimes. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that could be redone to capture the modern supply side while doing a much better job of the demand side. Something just semi-realistic would work. Do you like Breaking Bad? Do you have thoughts on Breaking Bad?
Yeah, I saw it when I was younger, and then I never finished it, and then I finished it really quickly, like many years later.
Okay.
And I was just like, why am I doing this to myself? It's just, I've got limited time in life. But then the ending sort of made it. You know, it's a very rewarding final episode.
Yeah. Does it bear any resemblance to the real world of drug production and distribution
in particular?
In your experience?
I mean, I don't know. Like I'd have to like go back and rewatch to like pick out the really ridiculous parts.
Yeah.
As we've been doing with Traffic. I'm trying to think. You know, I mean, it's the characters were just sort of more developed. You got to sort of like know people and their motivations a little bit more, and so that helped. I guess. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that really infuriates me about Traffic is the motivation behind it, right? Just the sort of rich kid malaise. Mm-hmm. That just strikes me as unforgivable. The rest, it seems like it's a function of being a movie rather than, as you say, like a limited series. Like, we don't understand Catherine Zeta-Jones' development. Michael Douglas is just a sort of cipher for DC politics.
Right, he's there for
Benicio
people to
Del
talk to
Toro
him.
is the moral center without human affect.
Yeah.
And so without the characters, I can't really see it. With Breaking Bad, at least you got that character development.
Do you have a favorite movie about like drug production, distribution, or even a documentary? Has anybody hit on the head for you?
Eugene Jarecki.
Oh, yeah.
The House I Live In. It's called The House I Live In. I think it was from 2007.
I literally downloaded
So
this to watch in anticipation of this episode and didn't get time for it. So
it's great. I mean, I think he does a fantastic job. It's made not actually that long after Traffic and makes much better sense of the drug trade. And I guess, he allows the moral dilemmas that people encounter to really just play out on screen in a way that you just don't get in a movie like Traffic. Yeah, I rewatched that not that long ago, and it still holds up as, I think, a critique of the war on drugs. Yeah.
great.
Can I piggyback on that question and ask you, Ben? You talk about in your book a little bit, you touch on a lot of stuff, but you mentioned like Thomas de Quincey and people who sort of changed cultural understandings of drugs. We talk about whether art matters to politics at all. Do you think like fiction about drugs or fiction about this type of stuff, do you think it affects people, or is that something that's overplayed? Is that, what do you think?
Well, in the case at hand, I think no, because it just so clearly is an effect of the political era that it's sort of coming at the end of rather than actually intervening in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was actually surprised to see it was made in 2000. I thought it was made before that. At the very
adapted from an 11-year-old idea at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So at the very beginning, Michael Douglas is in court and sort of telling off some lawyer, and he says, like, I'm not here to debate 1983 Illinois versus Gates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like that was a very important Supreme Court case that allowed police to get warrants based upon anonymous tips. This is a problem because then police can call in their own tips and get warrants. But that other Supreme Court decisions, the 1984 Comprehensive Crime Bill, and all the effects of like the 80s, like that stuff was, came way before 2000. Trying to deal with that era 10, 15 years later, I think just didn't really make a lot of sense. It makes much more sense as like a 1990s movie.
Mm-hmm.
So in that particular case, I think Traffic, does suffer from being locked in a particular era of the war on drugs. Like I said, I think it would be an interesting time to make a new version of Traffic that attempts a fictional portrayal of the contemporary drug trade, but with a little bit more moral nuance. Precisely because there's no real direction to drug policy, I would say. Despite Trump's fentanyl tariffs and whatnot, I think that we're at this time where thinking people actually don't know the best way forward, where it seems like a big mess, and we all know that the war on drugs was a huge failure. I think a lot of conservatives are even willing to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we're not really sure what comes next. Really, people who are very excited about the decriminalization experiment in Oregon now do feel somewhat chastened. They also feel like it was never really given a chance, but at the same time that it's difficult to do alternative drug policy. It's not an easy thing, and it probably requires resources that we're not going to put forward to deal with the problem. Again, most prominently, the problems of American healthcare. I think if we got something like a single-payer system in America, a lot of the pressing things that we consider to be associated with drugs would evaporate. I truly do believe that jobs, healthcare, the basics in America, if you can cover those things that we associate with dangerous drugs, I think will evaporate overnight.
Thinking about Portland, I don't know if this is something you agree with, and I have not looked into the data, but I know people talk about, certainly they did the decriminalization side, but they didn't pair it with like housing first actual policy that would allow people to get off the streets or like supportive services. I think in theory, some of those things were on the books, but at least if it's anything like San Francisco, a city I know much better, saying you're doing a housing first and actually doing housing first policies are extraordinarily different things. So, I think it sounds like that's what you're talking about. Like, maybe it's not enough to just attack the problem from a single angle of something like decriminalizing without all this stuff to go with it.
I mean, I think that that claim that you mentioned earlier about drug policy not being about drugs, I think it works at the back end of the book as well. And I think that when we approach drug policy, there's a tendency to want to focus on the drugs themselves, on problems of addiction, when the whole point of the book is to contextualize drug production, drug distribution, and drug taking within this broader context. And part of what I want to say at the end is that it's that context that we need to change. Like, we need to be pushing for a more social democratic America where people don't feel so precarious all the time in their basic conditions. And that's going to alleviate both the desire for drug pushing and drug prohibitionism. Like, there's a lot of wild things that people think about drugs in the United States. It's part of the appeal. It's part of the appeal of punitive drug policy. And, you know, the whole conclusion of the book is saying, we've done both of these things, right? Like, we've got fabulous drug peddlers in the United States. We've got wild drug prohibitionists. And instead of both of those things, let's focus on the other things that drugs deal with.
I'm so looking forward to your remake of Traffic, created by you, for Doo Plus or whatever the streaming service is.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mentioned that people saw this movie and thought that it made them smarter, and I gotta say, reading Quick Fixes, not only is it like pleasant to read, like an entertaining book, it also makes me feel smarter and better than other people who haven't read it. So I encourage everyone listening to this to read Quick Fixes. Great book.
It's got some little Luis Guzman and Don Cheadle style aside, just like humorous anecdotes to make it all go down smooth. So.
It's a real pleasure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. We have one final segment before we close things up, which is very complicated, and it is, of course, our segment Popcornopolis. Kimmy, can you explain this?
This is Popcornopolis, the segment where we ask our guest, do you like popcorn?
Do you like popcorn?
I've gone through phases. I don't go out to see movies in the theater much anymore. Just having kids and being busy and whatnot.
Sure.
And I do love getting popcorn at movies. I don't really eat popcorn otherwise, though. So I don't eat much popcorn now, but I do like it at the theater.
It's a great place for it. I recently been enjoying Popcorners. You guys have these chips?
I'm not aware of
the
this.
chips.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a corn chip. They've somehow made it.
We do have that here.
They've made popcorn into a triangle. I don't know how they did it, but I got some of those. Been enjoying those. So that's my update on popcorn.
This is like the hard molded cocaine of popcorn.
It is really the Espastico Jacobo of popcorn.
Yeah, okay.
And it comes in like, Cool Ranch or whatever.
Wow.
Well, Ben Fong, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very
absolute
much.
delight to have you. Is there anything folks should check out if they want more of your work? Where can they find all the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So Quick Fixes was a kind of one-off project. I work for a labor center at ASU and mainly write about much more boring things, specifically labor and logistics. I spend most of my time looking at spreadsheets on different Amazon facilities and looking at changes in their distribution network. So if your listeners are interested in that, in addition to drug films,
Ian has one tear rolling down his face like Erica Christensen right now.
I'm extremely. I mean, we do some Eric Loomis citing on this show. I don't know if it's anything like labor history type stuff. Yeah.
Oh, well, if you're interested, so the Substack that I run with a friend of mine is called On the Seams, ONTHESEAMS.substack.com. And you find a lot of stuff about what's going on at Amazon in particular, but the sort of like broader logistical world.
That's awesome. I'm going to check that out. Thank you so much for joining us. Cool. And thanks everybody for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review. It helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad. And tell your dad, fuck you. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Podcasty4Me. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a two-person Steven Soderbergh podcast, you can email us at podcastyforme@gmail.com. All that is also at podcastyforme.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. And if you can't wait that long, sign up for the Patreon. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. And as I said, we will do heroin on microphone.
I don't co-sign that, by the way. Be nice to your dad. Be very nice to your dad.
Oh yeah, don't actually say that
great.
to your dad. Tell him about the show.
Yeah.
That's insult enough, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. We will see you later.
Bye.